excuse me. Sorry. Eleanor Rodgers from Occupy Kensington.
So, I mean, again, I can go back and tell a bit about Kensington and how we got Occupy Kensington started. Kensington is in Brooklyn. We're just below Prospect Park. We're one of the many neighbourhoods that ring Park Slope, in the sense that we have people who are priced out of Park Slope moving into our neighbourhood, and so we've become an increasingly popular location for young liberal middle class families with children. And we have nice schools, some nice schools and then some not so good schools, using their criteria for schools. At the same time, it's an incredibly diverse neighbourhood. We have the biggest Bangladeshi population of anywhere in New York. We have a Hispanic population, smaller black population in the neighbourhood is dropping. But it's not statistically, whites are remaining the same. The middle class influx is replacing long-standing white working class families, mainly Irish and Italian, but also Jewish. So, and I've not mentioned the Russians, the Poles. We have everything. And Occupy Kensington does not. Occupy Kensington is pretty much white and American. Well, sorry, I'm Irish, but we came together kind of out of two things. We're, unlike the other two occupies we could talk about, we didn't come about directly and immediately in connection with what was happening in Zuccotti. Samumba said that we were one of the last neighbourhood occupies to form. We are a year old this weekend, actually. What happened in our neighbourhood was that just as Zuccotti Park ended, there was a grocery store in the neighbourhood where they hadn't been paying minimum wage. New York Communities for Change, which is kind of one of the descendants of Acorn, it's a non-profit that works with unions. It came in to work with the workers and try and unionise and fight for fair contract and so on. And they've been doing this actually for a year, but not publicised in the neighbourhood. And basically things weren't going too well, and they decided they needed to organise a community support campaign. And so in January last year, they organised a community meeting, people interested in supporting. We held a series of rallies in the neighbourhood in support of the Golden Farm workers, like threatening the owner with a community boycott and so on, over the next couple of months. And what happened was NYCC would come in and mobilise the community for a specific event, and then they'd disappear for a month while they went and did behind the scenes negotiations, and then they'd come back and mobilise the same people again. And so after about 3 months of this, we had a week of action that led to a one-day boycott. Like, from the inception of this, we were like myself, I'm a socialist activist. I've lived in the neighbourhood for 6 years. I'd done some work in trying to get people in the neighbourhood together to campaign on issues. My husband and I, we were both very surprised how many people came out for the Golden Farm workers from the beginning. And we started calling it the Occupy effect. Like, we would not have had this many people prepared to march down Church Avenue for minimum wage workers 3 months ago. Just no question, we wouldn't have. But it was all kind of conjecture until this day of action, when I went round and asked, like, kind of 15 people that I'd seen come and help most often, would you be interested in setting up an Occupy Kensington? And it turned out that all but 2 of them were on OWS subcommittees. But mainly this is kind of the younger, more blow-in part of the community. And so they were doing their politics in Manhattan and other places, and kind of keep them on the down low in Kensington. Kensington has no reputation of having a left history or anything like that. Now at the same time, I'd been in connection with a bunch of community-based people who, like people who were quite interested in Zuccotti as it was happening, but like they wouldn't see themselves as Occupy. Older people who'd lived in the neighbourhood 20, 30 years, whatever. Generally left people who also had always kept the left on the down low while they did community work. And we managed to bring all these people together into, when I say all these people, like the largest General Assembly we've ever had, we've had 25 people at. Like, it's a small local organisation, but it has brought together both kind of some of the younger, more classic Occupy types and a layer of long-standing community activists to get out in our neighbourhood with a more explicitly left message than they ever did before. And the main work we've been involved in, the Golden Farm thing, has dragged on and on and on. We picketed in front of Golden Farm for 7 months to keep a community boycott going. We managed to cut the take by about 30%. The owner is absolutely pig-headed, and he has held out. And we're, like, at the moment the boycott is off, negotiations are happening with the union, and we don't know where that's going. But as well as Golden Farm, public space is our next biggest issue. Like you, we have nowhere to meet. If we ever start regularly having meetings over 20, the moment we meet in people's living rooms, there's not even an outdoor space in our neighbourhood that would hold a meeting. Like, we've met on a street corner a few times. There isn't a public park in our neighbourhood. That's one of the main issues for local activists, actually. We've also organised one and taken part in another rally at the street corner that passes for a public space in our neighbourhood, in solidarity with workers killed in Bangladesh, both last year in the factory fire and then this year in the collapse. As part of trying to connect with the Bangladeshi community in the neighbourhood, we've attended Kamani Grey protests, along with people who've gone to Flatbush in solidarity with people there. We did stuff for Occupy Sandy. A couple of points I would make about how we've managed to keep going as a quite small, very community-based Occupy. I think one of the things that's been absolutely central is that we don't just discuss campaign work. We do obviously spend a lot of time talking about Golden Farm and public space in particular, and then other bits and pieces, but at almost all of our meetings, and we meet, on average we've met about twice a week for a year. Sometimes it's been more frequent.
Twice a month.
Oh, sorry, twice a month.
Wow, I was going to say
once every 2 weeks is what I was looking for. Once every 2 weeks on average. So we've had months where it's been once a week because things are happening tactically with Golden Farm and we have to have a lot of meetings. And then other times it would be once every 2 weeks, and then every now and again there's been a break. But what we find is when it gets down to just like campaign work and key things that are happening, and that's the only thing we're discussing, we get the lowest attendance, and it's the core people. And the way we've drawn in other people and kept them coming back and so on is having half of the meeting is a political topic. It's not always linked to something that we can directly do anything about. Often it's always linked to stuff that does affect us in some way or shape. But we've discussed the stop and frisk, we've discussed the presidential elections. With every shade in the room from we had people who came and argued for, we've got to vote for the Democrats, it's the lesser of two evils, right through to people who shouldn't ever vote for anything, basically. That wasn't put too strongly, but, basically Occupy had achieved more on the ground than any voting would do, and then people who were arguing for the Green Party or building an alternative. A full discussion. We've discussed boycott, divest and sanction. That was one of our best attended, most controversial meetings, in regard to Israel. Discussed the education reform movement and how to fight back Chicago's teachers' strike. All these different things, and that is what has kept people coming, and that's then how we get those people. People who aren't street activists, but they've come to the meetings, they're engaged, and we're convincing them, and that's how we're then getting them to go out on the street in a much more political way than they were before. And I guess one thing I want to say is Nikos made this point about why aren't we mass movements? And I feel that this is a refrain particularly from a lot of the younger people that I've talked to who are in Zuccotti Park, and there's a huge frustration. We were so big, we were, and the rest of the country didn't listen to us. There's all these people who are affected by all these things and they just didn't see it. And you're right, they didn't see it. They saw bits of it. There was a lot of sympathy. There was the working class in general in New York sympathised with and supported what was happening in Zuccotti Park for a period of time. But to keep that, you can't keep that going endlessly. We're not a mass movement because this, I'm a socialist, but this isn't a pre-revolutionary period. It's a pre-revolutionary period. This is the bit you try and build for that. It takes time, you have to be patient, you have to talk to people bit by bit and take them with you. And instead of saying, I have seen the light, now we must move forward, you have to say, okay, I've seen the light. Now we have to work on spreading the word and building people's resources to fight back.